What's up, guys? This is Adi from Thrylos International, and I am here for a quick match preview of Olympiacos versus FC Porto. As you guys know very well, in the Europa League, this is match day 7 coming up, and Olympiacos is traveling to the Stadio Dragao to play against Porto, a nemesis, we should say, that we know quite well. We played against them in the Champions League before. Not an easy opponent. And I do have a guest here today to chat with us about Porto and what can we expect. We have Zach Lowy here from Breaking the Lines. You can't see him, but he is here chatting with us on audio. Zach, how are you doing today?
Hey, doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be speaking about the upcoming match with Porto and Olympiacos, two of the biggest teams in Europe, no doubt.
Absolutely, and we're looking very forward to getting your opinions on things because it's a very interesting story what's going on in the Portuguese league, and we definitely are excited to hear about what we can expect. Before we start chatting, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're tuning in and you like the content. Every engagement helps us grow the red and white community as well as the community for Greek football. So help us continue to grow on all of those channels. You can visit us on Patreon as well for extra content. So, Zach, very quickly talk to us briefly about your background with Breaking the Lines and with Portuguese football before we start talking about FC Porto so the fans can learn about you.
Yeah, so basically, I co-founded Breaking Lines in December 2016, freshman year of college, and we've been able to take it from there over the past 9 years. Developing a lot of high quality content in terms of interviews, podcasts, analysis. We've always been able to differentiate ourselves and stand out because of this commitment to high quality football analysis. And we're always trying to branch out and delve into some really interesting topics. So the past few days, for example, we've been talking about like really interesting topics such as uh, the greatest derbies in Italian football history, talking about why Japan doesn't produce top quality strikers, what's
Oh,
going wrong
wow.
with Poland. So really just the most the some stuff that you probably won't necessarily hear on mainstream news outlets. But yeah, I'm very proud of the work that we're doing. We're only just getting started, and I think that 2025 is going to be a really big year for Breaking the Lines. We've got some very big plans laid out in front of us.
Absolutely. And I know that some of the analysis you guys do with players, coaching analysis, the data part, I love. I love data. I do most of the data analysis for us here. So I've been a big fan of that as well. So I look forward to
Yeah,
seeing what
and
you guys
we
do this year.
also have been the past few weeks have been doing a partnership with Once Analyzer, which is a not necessarily data, but more like illustrations and stuff. And that's
Mhm.
allowed two of our writers to put in some really good in-game analysis and kind of show the reader what exactly it is that this player does right or wrong. So definitely take a look at our collaborations with Once Analyzer.
Oh, 100%. 100%. We definitely will. Now, chatting about Porto, this is what everybody wants to hear about. They want to hear about what we can expect from an opponent that's always been very difficult for Olympiacos. We all remember when we played against them in the Champions League in the group stage, the 2020-21 season, the COVID season, I think we call it. And, two very difficult outings. We got nothing from either match. So Porto now, the situation this season's been different, and I think a new manager has also been just arrived. So Porto, maybe new manager bounce can be expected, makes things even more difficult. Tell us a little bit about the situation that's going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the situation, if you could use one word to describe the situation, is it's volatile. I think that, I mean, I've been following Porto for quite a while, and it's always been a very high pressure environment. But
Mhm.
I think that definitely the past few months have been one of transition. I actually wrote about this situation for FOTMob when the presidential elections happened. But basically, going back to May, of last year, Pinto da Costa's reign as president ended after I think 42 years.
Wow.
And so obviously, whenever a giant like that leaves, there's bound to be some, some tricky, tough times in terms of adjusting. I think that it definitely was the right decision for Pinto da Costa to be, kicked out of his time as Porto president, because frankly, the decline had really started to settle in with him. But as Olympiacos fans and fans of other clubs will know, once that decline starts to fester, it's kind of hard to just offset that damage. Even if you bring in new players or a new coach. And I think that overall there was just probably a bit too much transition from Porto's standpoint. I think that uh, you look at the new president as well as, of course, the new coach, right? Sergio
Right.
Conceição was, in charge of Porto from 2017 to 2024, and was definitely a Porto legend. He was able to stop Benfica's dynasty and deliver them back to the promised land. And of course, he was a big ally of Pinto da Costa. So once da Costa was out, that was Conceição's cue to leave. But unfortunately, the Andre Villas-Boas Vitor Bruno partnership has not really panned out. Vitor Bruno, I think he had never had a head coaching role before Porto. I
Yeah.
believe he had only been Conceição's assistant. And, it's very difficult to go from just an assistant role to coaching at one of the highest pressure environments in all of European football. And I think that, you know, part of what we've seen with Porto comes down to that, but it also comes down to certain things with regards to, failure in recruitment. There's a lot of reasons, but at the end of the day, it just has not been good enough from Porto's standpoint. And, I think that it was only a matter of time before Bruno was given the axe. He never really managed to convince. So I don't think that I don't think that they will have a new coach by the time that Porto face Olympiacos. I know that I believe Luis Castro and Edin Terzic have been linked with the coaching position. But I do think that Porto are going to have to try to, um, maybe be a little more patient and methodical with choosing their right manager, because it kind of seems like they went with the most convenient option in Vitor Bruno. Someone who knows the club, who's been an assistant, but and they're far from like crisis mode. They're far from rock bottom, but they are headed towards a trophyless season, which would obviously be a failure as far as they're concerned. They're 1 point behind Benfica, 4 behind Sporting, and of course have just lost their last 3 matches. So something definitely needs to change. And yeah, I think that they definitely need to find a new coach who'll be able to get the most out of them. They have a lot of really talented, promising players in this squad. But overall, I just think that they have kind of struggled to find the right balance and have not really been able to find a synergy between those players.
The part of this chaos that's kind of happened at Porto, it's part of the reason that Olympiacos through Nottingham Forest was even able to get David Garmo to begin with, at a slight discount compared to what the initial asking price was.
Right.
So, we were following that situation very closely over the summer because that was really, we were counting on maybe Conceição sticking around, tossing out Garmo a little bit more easily, but then in the end, he ended up with Olympiacos either way. Now, on one hand, the trouble that we're hearing, the some of the chaos or instability, we'll say, normally would be a good thing.
Right.
But for us, the way we've played this season, I don't necessarily feel as comfortable when I hear that because then that makes me think, okay, maybe Porto is going to play this game a little bit more pragmatically, which when I say pragmatically, I mean more bodies behind the ball, lower block. And And that is something we have struggled with. Mendilibar's system does better when teams play more openly against us. And a lot of teams have keyed in on that this season.
Yeah.
Rangers, in particular, they played bodies behind. They played lower block. They caught us on the counter, and and we struggled. Lower sides, like lower tier sides in Greece, have been doing this. We've struggled to break them down consistently, except for the early part of 2025. We've been finding ways to win. Do you think that what Porto's going through with, I guess we'll call him an interim manager, do
Right.
you think that they will take a more pragmatic approach?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's usually the case when there's an interim manager. And, I do think that Vitor Bruno probably tried to change it a little too much. But yeah, I think that Porto, they've definitely shown for the past decade that they really like that they like to sit deep and break on the counter. That's really been like their go-to, their mantra for so many high stakes European matches. Like I can think of so many off the top of my head. What when they knocked out Juventus from the Champions League a few years ago. When they nearly knocked out Arsenal last season. Like they are so good at just hitting on the counter and
Right.
just going forward from there. So yeah, I do think that it would probably serve them better to have a a kind of a more simplistic, pragmatic approach where they can kind of just focus on sitting deep, soaking up pressure, and then going from there. Because they do have some very impressive, dynamic, um, counterattacking weapons such as Wenderson Galeno,
Right.
Samu Agehawa. Even with like for example with Pepe, he's been he's been a fine, exciting winger, but is basically it seems like he's being forced out. Was not part of the Gil Vicente team, and there's reports that he's been kind of frozen out. Even without him, they've got some very talented players who are going to be able to just uh, just soak up pressure. But yeah, I mean, it might seem like I mean, obviously Porto are in a tough situation at the moment, but like I said, they're only just like 4 points behind the top
Right.
spot, and I think that ultimately this what we're seeing with Porto, it just kind of has more to do with the aura around the club, that culture of stress and toxicity, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like we saw this we saw this in their recent match against Gil Vicente when they lost, and I believe had like two people sent off.
Oh,
And
wow.
right after that, the entire Porto squad was, I believe they were called up to the Dragao, and even
Oh,
those
wow.
who even those who weren't included in the matchday squad, they were called up, and Andre Villas-Boas reportedly gave them a very tough dressing down. So yeah, I think that Vitor Bruno, like I said, he just was not at the caliber that Porto demands. Porto have had some of the best managers of all time in that position, and frankly, you need to have a good tactical approach. You need to be able to react well as a Porto manager, but above all, you need to have the ability to instill confidence in your players, to have that like aura, shall we say? And I think Bruno just never had that.
Makes sense. Now, two quick questions for you as we kind of start to wrap up here. Um, My first question, first of the two, is more so where you think Porto's weaknesses are. So, what have teams been exploiting so far that Olympiacos should be looking to exploit against a team that we can say on paper has better talent than Olympiacos does? I think we can be a little bit honest there. And then the second question is how will Porto handle the high press? Because Olympiacos is known ever since Mendilibar arrived for being a press first team. We press, we get most of our opportunities off of the press and the recoveries and the duels that we win especially in the opponent's final third. So what are the weaknesses that Porto has, and how will they deal with the press of Olympiacos?
I mean, based off the past 2 weeks or so, they have all the weaknesses. Like, it reminds me of uh, that David Moyes quote from his time as Manchester United manager. Like, the team has to improve in set pieces, attacking, defense. Like, that's pretty much where it is with Porto. I do think, like I said, they have some very talented players in this team, but right now they're just struggling to find the right balance. I think that, like, for example, it seems like their attacking play is a bit too individualistic, relying on Samu to use his pace and power and just attacking dynamism to kind of get Porto into a dangerous position. They've kind of struggled with having contributions from their fullbacks, I think, going forward. And I think overall have just kind of struggled to find the right balance where you'll have other players supporting other in attack. I think that's a big issue, and I also think that perhaps another issue is, well, like I said, the midfield balance has kind of been off. I would say since they lost Vidinha to Paris Saint Germain, they haven't really been able to find that right balance. Even though they have some quality players in midfield like Alan Varela, Nico Gonzalez, Steven Eustáquio, but I think what it comes down to is they've kind of they can't really find that balance. So a lot of times when they go forward, they'll be way too exposed on the counter, and there'll be so much space that will be able to be exploited. Um, and I also think that part of what it comes down to, I think, is also just the fact that there isn't the squad is not like, it just doesn't seem like it's clicking on all cylinders. Like, there's a lot of great players in this team, like Ivan Jaime, Pepe, some very talented players, Rodrigo Mora, who should feasibly be getting more minutes and aren't. And as such, a lot of them want to leave Porto. And obviously, it's very difficult when you've got, this is a game and only 11 players are going to start and
Right.
only 5 max will come off the bench. But I think that there's been that lack of like making sure that everybody's on the same page. And I think that all of that kind of has a snowball effect because, like, when you don't have players who are training hard and who are kind of maintaining that competitive but also happy and jovial environment, then I think that starts to creep into first team performances, and I think that's probably been the case with Porto. I think that overall there's been kind of that lack of synergy. I think a lot of these players don't want to be here, and a lot of these players, they do want to be there, but they just aren't really talented enough, either technically or mentally, um, to deal with this situation.
Yeah. Wow. This sounds like a very similar situation to Olympiacos very recently. So it's funny to hear that. And Ivan Jaime, Olympiacos fans will recognize we've been strongly linked to him until Porto put the 10 million euro price tag, which we clearly cannot afford. So very great information. Zach, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for the analysis for Porto, giving us an insight on what we can expect. Please let the fans know where they can follow you if they want to see more about what you do, what's going on at Breaking the Lines. Please let them know.
For sure, yeah. You can find me on Zach Lowy, ZachLowy, on Twitter. And you can also find our content at breakingthelines.com as well as BTLVID on Twitter. We're, posting about everything. We've even done some like deep dives on David Carmo and Jose Luis Mendilibar. So you might be able to find some cool Olympiacos stuff. if you dig hard enough. But yeah, we're like I said, we're very committed to providing top-notch football content, and there's going to be a lot more interesting stuff that you can find on the website this year.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Zach, for joining us, and hope you guys were able to get a little bit more insight about our opponents coming up in the next couple days. We're really excited for this. Remember, Olympiacos, by the probabilities, if you check out Football Meets Data, 86% chance of still going to the knockouts, even if we do not win the next two games. But hopefully, we can get a point out of the next two games or something at the very least to make our chances a little bit higher, and we'll see what happens. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Adi. This is Thrylos International by the fans for the fans, and we will see you after the match on Thursday.